Hey everybody, this is Caryn.
And this is Jill.
And you're listening to Screen Girl Squad. Well, it's the episode everyone's been waiting for because we promised it 2 episodes ago. But it finally happened.
Yay!
So for those of you that missed our episode on Unfriended Dark Web, where we explained why we didn't watch it Chapter 2, long story short, it wasn't Caryn friendly in the theater. So what we did instead is Jill went to go see it the other day with Kelly and our friends Mark and Michelle.
And Daryl.
Oh, and Daryl too.
We joked that I should have left Michelle at home and taken everybody's husbands. But I'm glad Michelle came, so she could crack jokes with me.
You're the best stand-in wife that I know.
It's true.
I was trying to explain to some of my friends outside of, the people that also know you about how you were kind of my wife for a while. Oh, yeah, I was telling my D&D group about how, my stand-in wife was at Chapter 2 with my husband.
Yeah.
So Jill is going to take us through the film. And I'm going to ask lots of questions based on my prior watching of the one from 1990.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, this is going to be a whole lot of Jill talking, which is the best part. So it's going to be up to you to take us through the spoiler-free synopsis of it, Chapter 2.
All right. Do we want to do a...
Oh, wait. So... When we were getting dinner before this, you teased me. You said that when you guys went to go see the movie, you were sat by a group of stand-up citizens who...
Oh my gosh. Okay, there was 2 different groups. So, both teenagers. So, when we first got there, we went to the recliner theater, and it had one of those rows that they're kind of boxed in with a wall. So you're separate from all the other rows. Which is nice usually because it cuts down on noise from other people and stuff. So I like it, but that means whoever is on your row, you get a lot of because the sound kind of gets trapped in that little place with you.
Yeah.
So when we first got there, we were sitting on one end, and there were 3 empty seats in the middle of the row, and then there was some other people on the far end, and then an empty seat on the very other end. Mm-hmm. So these 3 girls came in and decided to sit in the empty seats in the middle. And so we were like, oh, they must be their seats. But they looked confused and lost. And they kept asking us what row it was. And we told them. And they were like, yeah, this is fine. And just sat in the seats. And we were like, well, it must be their seat. Anyway, so they sat down. And then in the middle of the previews, more people came in and walked up to him and were like, I think these are our seats. And the girls were trying to convince them to sit somewhere else. And they were like, no, these are our seats. So the girls all got up, and they must have bought a bunch of seats not together.
Oh.
Because then the one girl had the seat on the end of our row, and then the other girls went and sat somewhere else. But then they didn't like that. So then they all 3 sat on the one seat on the end of our row.
Fun.
Yeah. And there was this poor couple trapped between the 2 sets of teenagers. So after a few minutes, they kicked the extra girls out of the one seat because who wants to sit next to that in a movie, right? They were talking the whole time and sharing a seat.
Yeah.
And so the other girls moved and went somewhere else. I don't know where, but then they texted each other the whole time. Or I'm assuming each other. The girl had her phone out the whole time. And she had that awesome feature where your phone flashes light at you when it gets a text message. So, it strobe lights when you get a text message.
But
so
you paid money to go to a theater and watch a film.
Right?
And I don't get that.
And then in the last 10 minutes of the movie, her phone rang and she answered it and was just sitting there talking on the phone.
No!
And then there was the other set of teenagers who came in late and kicked the girls out of their seats. Mm-hmm. And then they just talked the whole time. just commented, and you would just hear muttering the whole time, and then they would just get up and leave and come back and leave and come back and leave and come back, and then they were talking the whole time, and it was just awful.
That sounds unfun.
It was just the worst. Somehow I managed to just keep focused on the movie for the most part, but there were so many times people would walk by and Kelly and I would just look at each other and shake our heads like, sit the hell down.
Yeah.
Watch the movie, you crazy children. Why are you paying $10 to be here?
Yeah, and sadly you're in a recliner, so you can't like just stick out a leg and trip them.
Exactly. Well, and like, but the recliners were in such a way that like you have to move your feet if somebody walks by. And the third time this girl walked by me, I refused to move my feet. And she like kind of looked at me and I looked at her and like she didn't get up anymore. I don't know if it was because I was being a jerk, but I was like, I'm not going to keep moving my feet because you can't sit down.
Yeah. And I get like, getting up a couple times because that's a long movie.
And like, she chose to walk past all 5 of us in our group instead of like the 3 seats on the other side of her. Like, it made no sense. Walk past, like, 7 people versus 2 or 3. Like, it was really
Someday they'll grow up and they'll forget that ever happened, and then it'll happen to them, and they'll be like, dang teenagers. That's karma.
It's so true. Which, after the movie, I was talking to Kelly and Daryl, and I was trying to remember, because we were really good in movies, unless we had the theater to ourselves. Other than that one movie we almost got kicked out of. And what was that?
The Ben Affleck movie?
No.
Oh.
Because we were alone in the theater in that one and nobody cared.
Oh, yeah. I remember running wild.
It was like, it might have been Man in the Iron Mask. And we were like in Layton or something.
Oh, well, that wasn't, okay. So
what happened?
Okay, we're going to have to heavily redact some names here.
Because I was trying to remember, and I was like, I knew I wasn't a part of it, but I couldn't remember, like, anything else.
Well, that was the thing. Like, 7 of us went up to Layton to watch The Man in the Iron Mask, the Leonardo DiCaprio one, when it came out, where his face is tragically covered. Like,
horrible movie. It was not good. I'm sorry if anyone likes that movie. I did not.
But we had to be, like, 14 or 15 years old.
We were young.
And so we went up in this giant group, and 2 of our friends had just started dating. Like, maybe the day before. Maybe that morning. Who knows? They had just barely started dating, and they were doomed to stop dating, like, 2 days after this or something. So a real solid relationship. They made out that entire movie. The whole thing.
Because that's all they did in their relationship.
Yes. Yeah. And they were making out so aggressively that they fell out of their chairs and kicked the lady in front of us. Because it was, the reason we had driven clear up there was because it was the first stadium seating theater in Utah. And so if you kicked somebody, like it was the first time you were kicking someone in the back of the head instead of just in the back of their chair. So, yes, that's when the usher came and told us that we needed to be better behaved.
Okay. Well, I was thinking you were being loud, but it wasn't you at all.
No, posh. Like you said, if we had the theater to ourselves, like that Ben Affleck movie, where we just were running around like crazy.
Yeah.
And I do.
That movie was also terrible. Never see that movie. What was it? Ben Affleck and Sandra Bullock. I never remember what it's called. We tried
Forces of Nature.
And I still have no idea what happened. All I know is it was a terrible piece of garbage and we hated every second of it.
Yeah, because they're supposed to get together in the end, obviously, and then they don't.
Yeah.
And it's just I have no regrets about spoiling that movie.
It seems like they were both terrible people and you didn't really want them to get together, but you felt like that was the point of the movie. Mm-hmm. And so you didn't like any of the characters and didn't care about what happened to them. And then they didn't get together anyway. So you were like, what's the point of this movie?
Yeah, what just happened?
Yeah.
Mostly they were pretty well behaved, but I do have a pretty obnoxious and loud laugh. So I don't think I'm super fun. And when I was young, it was like even worse.
Yeah.
Even more out of control than it is now.
Yeah.
But apart from that, like, my parents didn't mess around when we were children. So if we were at mass or something and I was misbehaving, I would get dragged out of mass and sat in the car until church got out.
Yeah.
And I would just be like in the back of the car being punished, and my dad would sit in the front of the car listening to the radio, and I wasn't allowed to like read or color or do anything fun. I just had to like sit there staring glumly out the window at the traffic. So and same thing with the movie theater. They were like, we don't care if we just paid $6. We're yanking you out of here right now. And that's the last time you go to the movies for a long time because you just made us waste that money.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Which is a good way to be a parent. Like,
Yeah.
you were well behaved in public. It worked.
Yeah. So even when I was a teenager, I was pretty cranky about like, I just spent so much money. I'm gonna be invested in this experience, unless it's a terrible Sandra Bullock, Ben Affleck movie, and we're alone.
Yeah. Well, and I just forever, movies are my very, very favorite thing. And going to a movie theater is my very, very favorite thing. Like, I still get excited about it, even though I've been doing it for 30 years.
Yeah.
You know, like, I love it. I love going to a movie, going to a theater. So I would never, like, ruin that experience for myself.
Yeah, that's
Anyway.
it exactly. Because it's kind of your choice to be immersed or not.
Yeah.
I feel like the whole point of going is to be immersed, especially at the movie theater, because the screen is however
Huge.
many feet wide, and the sound is incredible. And yeah,
The
but
whole point is be present.
yeah,
I know I'm terrible and I play on my phone a lot, but be present in your lives. Put the phone away sometimes. That's for me the fun part of going to a movie is I don't have to look at my phone for 3 hours. Like, it's kind of a break. Enjoy the break.
yeah. This rant brought to you by
Jill will forever rant about phones in theaters.
I appreciate it. And I 100% agree. But bottom line, the movie, I assume.
Yes. Let's talk about the movie. Spoiler-free synopsis. This is chapter 2 of the It Saga. So it follows the adults. The kids were all in the first part, and so this is kind of what happens to them 27 years later, because it comes back every 27 years. So it's what happens to them 27 years later. So the first part of the movie is touching up with them on their lives, and then their adult struggle with Pennywise. So, yeah.
Yeah.
That's probably the easiest synopsis I can give.
Yeah, and you really can't watch the second one without having seen the first one, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So,
Well, you can, but it'd be real confusing.
yeah, probably.
Yeah.
And you probably wouldn't appreciate half of it. So,
Absolutely.
so definitely watch the first one before you watch the second one. Mm-hmm. So this is kind of a unique thing because I don't get to rate this one. It's 100% going to be Jill. Jill and I always rate movies on 2 separate scales. The first is enjoyability. And because we're total gluttons, or as Jill likes to say, munch mouths, we always choose some type of snack. And then we also rate it on a fright factor using something scary from the movie itself. So did you snack on anything? Kelly brought me home an entire bucket of popcorn.
He absolutely did.
Yeah.
Basket of popcorn.
Put the bottle in the bucket every time.
Every time. We had those awesome Airhead things that I can't remember what they're called.
Yeah, they had like a chewy center,
Yeah, like a soft chew Airhead thing.
but was sour on the outside.
Some of them were sour, some of them weren't.
Interesting.
So, like the yellow ones were sour because they were like lemon or something.
Oh, so they were kind of tart.
Yeah.
That sounds awesome. We tried, before we recorded tonight, we tried to find these Airheads that Jill had eaten.
They were so good. I don't have
we
to pay $6 at the movie theater to eat them again.
So, mysterious, chewy Airhead things.
Yeah.
Scale of 1 to 5. How enjoyable was it, Chapter 2?
I'm going to go with 4. There were definite things that I'll talk about later that I didn't love so much, but for the most part, I really liked it.
Okay, so that's the exact same rating that you gave it, Chapter 1, which you rated 4 out of 5 Malamars. So pretty consistent enjoyability across the 2 chapters.
I don't know. I might have to rate it 3.5 then.
Oh, really? Because it wasn't quite as good?
It wasn't quite as good.
Oh, all right.
I expected to like it as much, and I didn't. That was Daryl's first question when the movie ended was, okay, which chapter did you like better? And I was like, I honestly don't know. But the more I think about it, I liked the first one better.
Okay. So 3.5 mysterious, chewy Airhead things out of 5.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And fright rating, we can use the same scale we did for the first part, which was creepy clowns. Mm-hmm. So 1 to 5 creepy clowns. How scary was it?
Maybe 2.5. It honestly wasn't that scary. Like, it was more intense than scary. Like, more of a thriller feel
Okay.
than a horror movie.
Gotcha.
There were definitely some jumpy parts, and there was definitely a part that I jumped really hard at. And one that Kelly and I both jumped at, and I can't remember what it was, but Daryl said he laughed really hard because he knew it was coming. But yeah, I think there was maybe like 2 parts that I really jumped at. Otherwise, it was just kind of intense.
So 2.5?
Yeah.
Creepy clowns?
Yeah.
Okay. So on both fun and fright rating, it's a half unit less on both of those scales than part 1.
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair.
Yeah. Sometimes it's hard for sequels to knock it out of the park.
Yeah.
The same way the first one did.
And I mean, it wasn't bad, don't get me wrong. Like, I really did enjoy it. It was just not quite the same magic. And I have to say, for the original 90s one, I always liked the first half better than the second half.
Okay, that's really interesting.
Just like story-wise and stuff. And so I really wondered if that would be the same now, and it was.
Well, I love getting the answer to that question because I have always felt the exact same way. I loved the part with the kids better. And I always kind of wondered if it's because I saw it as a child, and so I identified more with the children. But now we're roughly the same age as, you know, the adults in it. Mm-hmm. So I was wondering if we'd identify more with them.
I didn't.
Okay.
So, I don't know.
Speaking of the adults, one of our favorite things, and one of the things that made the first one so enjoyable, was that the kid actors all rock and did such a great job. And I was really, really excited to see this one because you got Bill Hader and James McAvoy and Jessica Chastain. So yeah, so tell me a little bit about their performances.
I feel like they did a really good job. And I feel like this was a really well-cast movie. Mm-hmm. Especially like... I feel like Bill Hader with young Richie was a really good move.
Yeah.
And like the grown-up Mike Hanlon was really great, which is funny because he was the Old Spice guy. And so Michelle and I, at one point, they were in the library looking for a book, and Michelle leans over and she's like, "Look at your man. Now back at me." Because you just can't help. But yeah, he did a really good job because he was nothing like the Old Spice guy, or I've seen him in a couple other things where he's kind of like cocky and knows he's good looking, and he wasn't that at all. He was like nerdy Mike to a T.
He was pretty handsome. Isaiah Mustafa. He's a good looking guy.
He's real pretty. And he didn't like, you weren't like, ugh, he's gross, but his personality is not something I find attractive. And so I think the whole time I was just like, yeah, he's there, whatever. But most of the time when I see him, I'm like, hello, sir. So it was interesting that he did such a good job that I was like, oh yeah, Mike, whatever. He's the smart guy.
Yeah.
Like, anyway, he did a really good job. The guy who played Stan, I feel like was so perfectly cast. I think like
Andy Bean.
if you look at Stan and then you see him grown up, you're like, is this the same guy? Like, did they just have him age? Like, he looks perfect.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And the same with Eddie. I feel like Eddie, the same. Like, he looks so much like the kid version of him that, I don't know, it was really interesting.
And I don't really recognize him from anything. James Ransom.
I don't recognize... There was a lot of them I didn't know from other things.
Oh, he's been in, like, Sinister and some other horror films. So, okay.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. But anyway, I just felt it was really well cast, and everybody did a really good job. Oh, and the grown-up Henry Bowers looked so much like Henry Bowers.
Oh, yeah, and who played Henry Bowers?
And I didn't recognize him either.
Teach Grant.
Yeah.
And he looks really familiar. I feel like I've seen him in something else. Oh, he was in like a few episodes of Altered Carbon, which is awesome.
Which I haven't watched.
So yeah, so they held up.
So they all did a fantastic job. And I am super in love with James McAvoy. And I was really sad that he didn't get to speak with his Scottish accent, but he still was very pretty the whole time, so it was good.
Well, and he's just a super talented actor.
He is. I just love watching him in everything he's ever done. Mm-hmm. So...
Well, I'm eager, since I didn't get to see the movie. I want to hear the movie through Jill's eyes. Let's do it. Let's do our spoilers. Spoilers. Okay, Jill. Take me through this puppy.
So the movie starts out, and they're at like a fair in Derry. And there's a bunch of little kids, and then like a grown-up, I don't know, that he's like maybe 19, all playing the squirt gun game, you know, where you squirt the water into like a clown's mouth. Of course, it's a clown.
And fill up the balloon.
And it fills up the balloon. And so this guy is like being ridiculously competitive about it and like looking at all these little kids and like, I'm going to get, and he wins a prize. And then he like says to this little girl, like, oh, you wanted to win? You should have tried harder or something. He says something and then he's like, just kidding, and gives her the animal. And he's like, you played really good. And it was like really cute. And just then this other guy comes up and like puts his arm around him and was like, that was so cute. You're so nice. And it's his boyfriend, and it attracts the attention of a group of boys who then get mad that there's this gay couple.
And this is present time? This isn't like a flashback to the 80s?
Yes.
Disappointing.
Very disappointing.
Yeah. Not that it was okay back then.
No,
I'm just saying.
But
I have higher expectations for the modern world.
Yes. Which we'll get to in a minute, but I'm very upset about this whole part. So they're like holding hands and walking away, and these guys come up and give them a hard time. And they're just like, leave us alone. What's wrong with you? Like, everything's fine. And they say some really derogatory things. And the guy who was playing this word game, like, turns around and they're like, go back where you came from. Nobody wants you here, or whatever. And the boyfriend turns around and he's like, he grew up here. He has every right to be here. We have every right to be here. Like, leave us alone. And then they jump him and just start beating the crap out of him. And they're like holding back his boyfriend while they just beat the crap out of this guy. And like throw him over the bridge into the river.
What?
Horrible. And his boyfriend is just crying and freaking out the whole time and runs down the bank of the river to try and find him. And he gets down there and through the mist sees his boyfriend in the arms of Pennywise.
Whoa.
And then sees Pennywise bite his head off. And then like a million red balloons come out from under the bridge and like fill the whole river. And then they kind of part and the guy's just gone. And Pennywise is gone. So
Dang.
He gets totally gay bashed and beat up and then eaten by Pennywise. And I had such a hard time with that because I was like, why couldn't have eaten one of the bullies? Like, why? But because he's Pennywise, he wants the hatred. And, it does that whole Stephen King that humans are the worst monsters. And, the humans do the horrible things and then Pennywise just makes it worse.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, was he just laying in wait knowing that humans would be crappy the way that they are? And he was just kind of, like a vulture or something, like waiting to, or because it seems like in chapter 1, there were definitely times where it seemed like, with the videos and things that he was putting on and little kids shows, like he was definitely inciting people to behave in certain ways. So you wonder, is he just like picking up the pieces from what humans are already going to do, or is he nudging that particular group because he wants
I wondered that as well. And I also found it interesting because maybe the boys were teenagers, but they looked older, like young 20s. And so it seemed like an old victim for Pennywise as well.
Oh, yeah.
So it was interesting in that respect, like in two ways. Like, was he just waiting for something bad to happen? Did he orchestrate it? And why was this older person the victim?
Yeah. Interesting.
So, yeah, that was really interesting.
It sounds like a real gut punch beginning, though.
Yeah. And it just starts out and you're like, oh, this sucks.
Yeah.
Like, it was just really hard to watch. And then after that, so Mike is living in town, which is the same as the original. Mike has stayed in town his whole life. And so there's a thing that happens when you leave Derry that you forget.
Right.
Like you forget everything. You forget your friends. You forget what happened. You forget Pennywise. You forget everything. And so he remembers because he's stayed in Derry the whole time. And so he, like, realizes that Pennywise is back. I think he goes to the riverbank and sees a red balloon, maybe. Or, he sees a red balloon and then painted in blood on one of the pillars it says, come home, come home, come home.
Ooh.
So it was
I just got like chills.
Yeah. So it was like Pennywise was telling him, gather the troops, basically.
Okay.
It was creepy. It was cool.
Yeah.
I liked that part. So Bill is working on a movie set. He's got this actress wife.
Right.
Who, I guess I can just say, plays a very different role than in the original. Like, she's in this scene and that's it.
Oh.
So, he's got this actress wife and they're writing a movie or a TV show. I'm not sure which, but they talk about how he is terrible at writing endings. He can't write endings.
Which I think.
And so they're waiting for him to finish his pages and he like is just dicking around and doesn't want to do it. And so like the movie starts and he's like chilling and watching crap on the internet and somebody knocks on his trailer door and he like flips his head so his glasses come down and he like puts his hands on his computer like I'm working, you know. And then they tell him that he's wanted on set and he goes and his wife's like, you got to give us these pages. And she tells him, she's like, you're really bad at writing endings, but you can do it. I know you can. And he like gets all butthurt and upset, of course, because nobody wants to hear like, you suck at this thing. So he kind of storms off and then he walks outside and he gets a phone call and it's Mike. And he's like, hey, this is Mike Hanlon from Derry. And you can tell in his face, he's like, who? And then he's like, oh. And it like kind of... They talk about later when they all get together that they all got scared and nervous, but didn't remember why. Or like didn't know why they were nervous, but knew they needed to go. And he like tells them, you made a promise when we were kids. It's come back. You have to come back. And so he just packs up and goes. And then it shows Richie. And you just see Richie like run out of a building and throw up over the side of a railing. And his personal assistant or something, somebody's following him. And he's like, dude, are you okay? What's going on? Like, you have to go on in like 5 minutes. And he's like, no, yeah, I'm fine. Anybody got a breath mint? And everybody hands him like breath mint and like a cup of booze or something. And he downs it and goes on stage. And he's a stand-up comedian now.
Oh.
And so he goes out and starts to tell jokes and then just stops midway through and he's like, I forgot what I was going to say. And some guy in the audience is just like, you suck. And he's like, yeah, I do. And just like leaves.
Oh, wow.
So he just like leaves his set.
And that was before he got the phone call from Mike? Or?
And so you assume it's after.
Oh, I
he
see.
like runs out and throws up. I think he has the phone in his hand.
Oh, okay.
So it goes to Eddie, who is with his wife, who is so much like his mom. So his mom in the first movie is like super overprotective and overweight and yells a lot, and his wife is the same. And according to the movie trivia, played by the exact same woman, which I think is so funny. So his mom had dark hair and his wife has blonde hair, but otherwise they are the exact same woman, which I thought was such a funny like piece of trivia. They just dressed her different, but used the same lady.
That's awesome.
And so he clearly like married his mother, which he was a total mama's boy. No one is surprised. So he gets same thing, gets the phone call. His face goes just white. He starts freaking out. He's like, I have to go to Derry. And his wife's like, what are you talking about? And he just packs up and leaves. Right. And she's like freaking out. And he's like, nope, going. And just goes. And then, Ben Hanscom, which I think is funny because he turns out real handsome. So Ben Handsome, and the grown-up Ben, holy crap, so beautiful. I don't know who he is, but he was real nice to look at. Everyone Google him. He's real pretty.
Jay Ryan. Ooh, he's from New Zealand.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty nice to look at.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he is an architect, I think. Yes, architect. And so he like is Skyping in to a meeting and they're talking about building a building, and he talks about how it needs more windows, it needs to be light and airy so it's not a prison. But the most interesting part of the scene for me was when it first starts, before you see Ben on the TV, there is someone else leading the meeting, and I was like 99% sure, and then came home and looked it up and I was right, is Ben from the original series, the little boy, but all grown up.
What?
So like the whole time I was really distracted because I was like, I know that kid. And then I was like, oh my gosh, he kind of looks like young Ben. But it like took a minute.
So that was their little tip of the hat, since they couldn't do the casting dream.
Yeah, they couldn't do the whole casting thing, I guess, which I'm real sad Seth Green didn't make an appearance or something, you know. But I thought it was so cool that they used him in this Ben scene. So that was kind of my favorite part of the whole movie. Awesome. And so there's, the scene with the two Bens, as I like to refer to it in my head. So they're in the meeting, and then Ben gets off the meeting, and he's wearing like a shirt and tie and then like sweatpants, and he's like walking around this really cool house. And same thing, he gets a call, and he like just immediately, okay, packs up and goes. And then Bev, same thing, she gets a call, but it's like the middle of the night, and she is with her husband. And the scene from the original movie, like, I felt like she was really strong. So her husband gets mad and doesn't want her to go, and basically finds out that it was Ben who calls her someone named Ben. And so then he gets real mad, and he's like, I'm not going to let you run off with some other dude.
Right.
And starts to like beat her and pull her down and try and keep her there. And I feel like in the first movie, she says something like, I'm not going to be afraid anymore, and like hits him or something.
Yeah.
And in this one, she just does whatever she can to escape and just gets out of there. Like it felt more like she didn't get brave. She just somehow got out.
I think that's still brave.
Which, I mean, is still incredibly brave, but it wasn't like, she didn't like declare anything. She just fought and got out, which is totally fine.
Yeah.
But it didn't.
And maybe more realistic.
Yeah. A little more realistic, I think, is how it felt.
Yeah.
And so that was really, hard. But she just packed up, basically, put pants on over her pajamas, grabbed a bag, and headed out. Like, it was really, she didn't take a lot with her because he was stopping her from packing. And she just hit the road. And then it goes to Stan, who Stan gets the phone call and just goes sheet white, doesn't say anything. His wife's like, who's on the phone? And he's like, no one. And then goes upstairs, and you get a good butt shot, which was, he gets in the bathtub, and you get to see Stan's bun cheeks. And then he crawls in the bathtub and slits his wrist.
Right.
In the original one, he writes something on the wall in his blood. I can't remember what it was. I'm sorry, maybe?
Yeah, I think so.
And in this one, he doesn't. So he just slits his wrist, and that's it.
I've been wondering if they were going to do that again, because in the original one, Stan sees its deadlights when they're in the sewer. And in my head, it always made sense. Like, of course he can't go back to that because he got such a bigger dose of it than anyone else. But in the first one of these movies, Bev gets the deadlights. So I'd been wondering if they were going to, like, change Stan's fate or something.
Yeah. But, no, they did not. So poor Stan does not go to meet up with everyone. So it flashes to Chinese restaurant, which I think is great because that was in the original as well. They go to this Chinese restaurant. It felt very similar. Like, and they go, and there's a big round table, and they all filter in one at a time. And I think the first ones there are Mike and Bill and maybe Richie? Eddie, maybe. I think it's Bill and Eddie and Mike that are there first. And then Bev pulls up outside, and Ben follows her right in, and they see each other and hug, and she talks about how great he looks, which is true. And he talks about how great she looks, which is also true
because she's Jessica
Chastain is a friggin' gorgeous. So, and then Eddie shows up and makes some sort of inappropriate comment because Richie shows up and makes some sort of inappropriate comment because he's Richie, and that's what he does. And then they all go into the Chinese restaurant, everybody sees each other, hugs everybody, and, it's all great, and they all have dinner. And then after a while, they all are like, oh, Stan's not here. And I think Mike says Stan first, and then everybody kind of goes, oh, yeah, Stan. Like, they had forgotten. And so then Mike starts explaining to them, when you leave Derry, you forget. And that's when they all say, like, we got the phone call from you. I knew I had to come, and I got really nervous. And, like, Richie says, I threw up. And he's like, but I don't know why.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know why I was so scared to come back here. And so Mike starts telling them Pennywise, this clown that was, you know, tortured us when we were kids, and they all slowly start remembering stuff. But they said, even as, like, being in town, I'm remembering, like, bits and pieces more just by being with you all, but I'd forgotten everything. They're like, I didn't even remember growing up here.
Oh,
like,
wow.
They didn't remember anything.
So not just Pennywise, but everything.
They forgot everything. Well, not everything, but we'll talk about that in a minute. So they forgot most things, but, like, they could remember feelings. Like, they knew that they loved and cared about each other, but, like, couldn't remember why. Which is so, like, scary to me.
Yeah.
That you just, like, can totally forget someone who was so important to you. But it's that whole, you know, Pennywise magic charm thing.
Well, that's, I think, real adult life, too. You know, because there are people that were such an important part of the early part of your life, and then you grow apart, and then you, like, see a news story about them, or you bump into them in a grocery store, and it's crazy to think of how many years it's been since you thought of them, even though they were this enormous part of you.
Yeah.
So
there's actually a Taylor Swift song on her new album that totally reminds me of this. It's called I Forgot That You Existed, but it's more of like a breakup song of like, you were so important to me, and then one day I just forgot that you existed, and it was the most like freeing, amazing thing in the whole world. And it like is the best song because it makes me think of like, oh yeah, because you're like so heartbroken about someone, and then all of a sudden you don't think about them for weeks, and you're like, nice.
I think about that all
like
the time.
That is the best feeling when you like are getting over someone, to all of a sudden not be thinking about them anymore. Yeah.
And I definitely take heart in that when you're going through hard times, you know, like you have to remind yourself in a few years you won't even maybe remember that this happened, or if you do remember it, it'll be through different eyes. Because I remember being young and it felt like everything was earth-shattering.
And
like
huge.
Someone would break up with me and I would be flattened for months about it. And then I look back and I'm like, I barely remembered dating them.
Right? So, you're like, they're not even a blip on the radar anymore.
Yeah.
Especially when you're me and 35 and have dated way too much. Because I'm still single. Just saying. You used to way outweigh me with people you've dated.
It's true.
It's not a thing anymore. Because as
win
we were
now.
just talking about, you've been with Kelly for like 16 years.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and that's the other thing too. It feels like there are these big milestones in your life, and everything before that milestone gets markedly more fuzzy than everything else. And so I feel like that's almost normal too. Like you move away from your childhood home, something I've never experienced.
Hey, you did for a bit.
I did for a bit. And you know, that it just starts to blur and fade. But it still is heartbreaking. And I think it's heartbreaking because it would terrify me now to think about not seeing you and like you fading from my memory, or one of our other super best friends. So
that's what I think. It's like you and I have been close forever. Like we bought our house when I was like 6 years old, and that's how long I've known you. And so like, yeah, it would be so weird to all of a sudden A, not talk to you all the time, but B, like not even think about you. Like I can't even imagine that, you know?
Yeah.
But that's exactly what this is.
Adulthood is weird.
I know.
Yeah.
It's way weird.
So let's see. Is that everybody all there in the...
So yeah, they're all in the Chinese restaurant. So Mike is reminding them all of their past, and then, but not all at once. Like he kind of is trying to ease them into it, 'cause it's a lot, like, especially when you forgot. So he's like kind of telling him about Pennywise and how they fought him and he went away, but he's back now, and how he comes back every 27 years. So it's been 27 years, and how they need to be the ones to finish it. And they're all pretty much like, no, this is not a thing that's going to happen. And then the fortune cookies come, which, if you've seen the original, exactly the same. Like the fortune cookies come and they put a big focus on the plate of fortune cookies as it gets sets down. And the whole time I'm like, there's demons in the fortune cookies. And there were. So they start opening the fortune cookies and little like demony creatures come out. Like I think there's a bat in one. And the worst one was that Mark did his amazing, really loud laugh. Was this little like baby face, but with crab legs, that was like scurrying around the table, and it looked ridiculous. And so Mark laughed really loud. Like, we all laughed, but Mark laughed real loud.
Like, reject this in a good way or a bad way? Sounds like a bad way. I heard that this movie had a little too much leaning on the CGI. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And this was one of those. Like, this weird baby-faced crab thing was crawling around. There was a bat flying around. I can't remember what else came out of the fortune cookies. Those were the two things that were ridiculous to me. And I hate bats. I'm kind of scared of bats. So that one stayed with me. And then I think there was a spider, but that was the original one. I'm getting confused about, like, what came out of the fortune cookies in the originals versus...
I remember in the originals, one was, like, filled with blood. And one was, like, a weird-looking baby bird thingy.
Oh, yeah. I think there was the dead baby bird.
Yeah.
And then there was... I think an eyeball crawling around, like, with just the veins coming out the eyeball,
Ugh.
you know. But each fortune cookie had a piece of paper inside. So maybe they got the pieces of paper and then all the creatures came out of the fortune cookies. That's probably what happened. So they got the pieces of paper. Yep. Sorry, folks. I'm remembering this like we saw this movie like 3 days ago. I'm trying my hardest. So all the fortune cookies had little pieces of paper in them. And they each had a single word. And so Bill immediately starts trying to arrange the words to make a sentence. And it says something like, guess Stan just couldn't cut it.
Oh.
Yeah. And that's when they realize something happened to Stan.
Oh, okay.
So then all the creatures start coming out of the cookies. They all run out of the restaurant. Well, and they're like destroying the restaurant, like trying to smash all of the things, like everything. And somebody, I can't remember if it's Richie, smashes a chair on the table to like squash all the things. And the waitress walks in and Richie like, hey, can we get the check? Like, just totally nonchalant and cool.
Which was like,
Richie was the best part of this movie, hands down. You know, I love the funny guy. So Richie... I was like, hey, can we get the check? And then they all just, like, get out of there. And this little kid comes walking up to him and says some line, and I can't remember what it was. But it sounded sort of creepy. And Richie, like, yells at him, thinking it's, like, the clown messing with them or something. And he, like, yells at this little kid. And they're all like, Richie, what are you doing? And he's like, it's a line from your show, or, like, from your stand-up, you know? Oh. And he's like, oh, I'm sorry, are you a fan? Do you want to take a picture? And the kid's like, no, I'm good. He goes back to his parents. Because he's, like, all traumatized that Richie yelled at him.
Yep, don't meet your heroes, kids.
Yeah, don't meet your heroes. Said I only wanted a picture of LeVar Burton. Anyway, you watched Community, right?
No.
Oh, my gosh.
I mean, I've seen a few episodes, but... not all the way through.
Chevy Chase's character pretends that he's dying and like just to mess with everyone and get sympathy, and he like is fulfilling all these people's wishes. So Troy's wish is to get a picture of LeVar Burton, and he like brings LeVar Burton to meet him, and he just stands there with his eyes all huge and can't say anything. And then he, like, goes off into a room by himself, and he's, like, crying and pacing, and he's like, I said I only wanted a picture of LeVar Burton. He's like, I never wanted to meet him. You can't disappoint a picture.
Is that Donald Glover's character? Okay, yes. I can totally see that.
And it's just the best scene ever. But, yeah, never meet your heroes.
Yeah. It's for the best.
Mm-hmm. So they walk out of the restaurant, and Bev picks up her phone and calls Stanley's wife. And she's like, hi, you don't know me. I'm a friend of Stan's. And then his wife immediately says, I'm so sorry, he died, whatever. Oh. So that's how they find out that Stan, and I think they find out he killed himself. I think she tells him that. So they're all like, Stan's not coming because he's dead. Like, this is horrible. And Richie's like, screw you guys, I'm going home.
Yeah.
Like,
with a normal, ordinary response.
Like, he's like, nope, I remember now why I didn't want to be here. I do not want to die by a killer clown. I'm going home. Mm-hmm. And they all go back to the inn that they're staying at. And Richie freaks out, goes upstairs, starts packing. Ben's like, let me go talk to him. I'll calm him down. And heads up the stairs. Richie and Eddie decide that they want to leave. And Ben goes and convinces him to stay. Mm-hmm. And Ben and Bev kind of have a moment because Ben has been in love with Bev his whole life.
Right.
And they're like sitting on the stairs talking. And then Eddie and Richie are both like, we're leaving. We're packing up. Peace out. And Ben's like, let me go talk to him, and goes off and does his thing. So, in the meantime, Bill goes with Mike to the library, and Mike's like, Bill, I want to show you something. And they go to the library, and Mike is like living above the library, which is interesting. And it's funny because they walk into the library and Bill's like, I remember this building being bigger. And you and I have said that so many times. Like, you go into somewhere and you're like, this feels weird. Yeah. I remember this being different. Yeah. So, like, our elementary school up the street, I think we walked into it one day, a voting. Yeah, I think it was a voting center. And you walk in and you're like, this feels weird.
Everything is little.
Yeah. Everything here is tiny. And
God forbid you have to, like, use the bathroom in your old elementary school for some reason.
That is the worst. They are the tiniest.
The stalls aren't even like as tall as your face.
Don't go to elementary schools. It's creepy. So Mike goes with Bill, and they go into his apartment, which is just like this mess of a loft with like stuff everywhere. Marie Kondo would have a field day. He has like stacks of books and papers everywhere, like you'd expect from a researcher, like he is.
Yeah. And is he the librarian?
And he's the librarian.
Okay.
Yeah. And so he gives Bill a drink of water. I'm saying water in air quotes for those listening at home. And Bill all of a sudden starts feeling weird. And Mike tells him about how he went to see some Native Americans who live outside of town, and they gave him some drugs and told him the origin story of Pennywise.
Right.
And then Bill starts feeling weird, and he's like, did you drug me? And he's like, yeah, I want you to know what I know. Oh. So he drugs Bill, and Bill goes on this drug-fueled vision quest, basically, and learns that Pennywise is a being from another planet who came here, and he's like an eater of worlds, is what they say. And there's a ritual that you can do to kill him. And so he kind of sees what this ritual is.
Interesting. And they didn't do that, so that's in the book.
Yeah.
Not that exact order of events. They are in kind of more of a sweat lodge thing, but
yeah.
They didn't address that in the 1990 miniseries at all. Like,
no.
Yeah. Mm-mm. Okay, so that's cool that they brought it in for this one.
Yeah, which was weird for me because I was like, what do you mean he's an alien?
Yeah.
Like, why is this a thing? And so it was a little weird for me. I'm not sure how I feel about it still, but we'll talk about that later. So Bill has this vision of the ritual and how they can stop Pennywise for good.
The ritual of chewed.
The ritual of chewed, yeah. Exactly.
It's got the umlaut over the over the U, like doof from Sweden.
Yeah. Which, for those of you who don't know what that means, like me, it's the 2 dots. 2 dots above a letter.
What, you didn't watch The Simpsons?
No, you know this. I've seen like 3 episodes. I can quote one. Is cat now. That is it.
Homer wants a fancy beer. Like, he wants to spend some extra money and drink, like, something different. Mm-hmm. And so Mo draws an umlaut over the U in Duff. And he's like, oh, try this. It's Doof from Sweden.
Perfect. So, yeah, an umlaut is 2 dots above a letter. For those of us non-writers.
Or for people who learn about the world from a 1990s animated sitcom. Yeah.
I learn all of my stuff from TV. Yeah. It's totally fine. So then, back at the inn, Beverly explains to, I believe it's Ben, that she's having her heart-to-heart with Ben, and explains that because she was exposed to the deadlights when they were kids, she has had nightmares about all of them dying ever since she left Derry. Oh. So she knows that Stan killed himself in the bathtub by slitting his wrists because she has seen all of them die.
Oh my gosh. Okay. That's creepy.
So, yeah. So she says this to Ben, who's a little taken aback, and Richie overhears and freaks out. And he's like, nope, this is creepy. I can't stay here. And really wants to leave. But he doesn't. So then Mike and Bill show up and they all talk about it. And they're like, okay, the best chance that we have to survive is to stay together and do this ritual. And it has to be all of us. And they're like, Stan's not here, but what we have to do is get a token from all of us, something important to us from our childhood. And we have to gather all of these things. And we'll start with Stan. So then they like go off. And then it flashes to Henry Bowers in the mental institution. So I can't remember if it is at this part or earlier in the movie, but in the end of the first movie, they defeat Pennywise. He goes into the hole. All of those children that were like suspended in the air drop down.
Yeah.
So it shows all of these bodies washing out of the sewers.
Oh my. Ugh.
Horrifying.
Yeah.
And amongst them is Henry Bowers.
Because he had fallen through that well.
Because he had fallen through the well. So he washes out with all these dead kids. And, like, wakes up and stumbles home to where the police are there. And he has murdered his father and his two buddies.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so they do, like, show that his two buddies are dead.
Yes. So the police are like, what are you doing here? And they're like, what happened to your dad? And he's like, I killed him. And he's like, I'm going to go kill everybody else. And they, like, immediately arrest him, right?
Right.
And he's like, no, I have to kill them all. I have to kill them all. He's like freaking out. They arrest him. He's been in an insane asylum ever since. So they show Henry Bowers and he's in the asylum and he sees a red balloon floating outside the window. And he gets really excited and really happy and, like, jumps up and, like, is holding onto the bars and is basically like, hi, it's my best friend. Like, he's so excited and clearly so mentally unstable. So he, like, excitedly sees the balloon, but because he's, like, freaking out, they drag him to his room and there's another, like, the red balloon, like, follows him through the windows all down the hall. He goes into his room. And he's really sad because the balloon is not waiting for him outside his window when he gets to his room. And he gets locked in his room. From under his bed, a red balloon just starts, like, growing. And he, like, gets real excited that there's this red balloon in his room. And it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And pops. And his dead zombie friend is under his bed.
Oh, good.
And is like, hey, Henry, we have work to do. Are you ready to bust out of here? And he's like, here you go, buddy, and hands him his knife.
The old switchblade?
He's like, my knife, and gets really excited. And that's, I think, where it cuts off. But, like, that whole balloon scene and then, like, zombie friend behind it was so, like, jolting. Like, you expected Pennywise, not, like, friend with his face falling off, you know?
It's funny, like, as you're telling me this stuff, the things that line up with the miniseries, I'm picturing those actors in my head. I haven't pictured the actual modern actors, like, once, except for when you were describing Bill Hader throwing up over that rail.
Which makes sense.
The rest of the time in my head, it's the old cast.
Yeah, which makes sense. So then the nurse comes in to sedate Henry because he's clearly being unruly. And Henry stabs him with his knife and escapes, gets out. And his zombie buddy, this is so silly to even say, his zombie buddy is waiting outside in a car and drives him away. Sure.
I kind of like that because you're not sure.
Like, how much is he hallucinating?
Yeah,
what is actually happening?
Yeah.
But he drives away in a car somehow.
Yeah.
So whatever.
Yeah.
And I think as he drives away, there was a red balloon either in the car or floating behind it. Anyway, so you know Pennywise gets him out, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, it's not like zombies really are breaking people out of insane asylums. So, I mean, maybe weirder things have happened. So then it shows the losers, and they're like at the quarry. Reminder, the losers is the group of adults. They call themselves the Losers Club.
Yeah, Jill's not just like being mean to these actors.
I actually like them all and think they're cool. So the Losers Club go, and they figure out it's where they all met, because it's like down in the quarry where they all were like, Ben came down after Henry tried to cut him, and that's where they all met. So,
or the Barrens or whatever?
The Barrens, yeah.
Because the quarry is where they went swimming.
That's right.
Yeah.
The Barrens. So it flashes back to them being kids, and Ben falling through a hole and discovering like a big empty cavern place. And so present day, like when he was a kid, Ben made it into a clubhouse. So they all go down into this clubhouse, and there's like a Lost Boys poster on the wall, which was amazing. And they all had like stashed stuff all over. So Stan had given them all shower caps so that they didn't get spiders in their hair. And when he first tries to give Richie one, Richie's like, I'm not going to wear that. Like, who would wear that? And then it like flashes over to everyone else with shower caps on their head. And so it's just fabulous. And it was like, showed Eddie and Richie like fighting over the hammock. There's like one hammock, and it was like, they were like, it's a rule, everybody gets one for 10 minutes, and you know, they're like fighting about it, and he's like, no, I'm not getting out, and they end up like sharing the hammock, and it's just really funny. And they're like fighting the whole time and like kicking each other and just being ridiculous. And so they go and they get Stan's shower cap, and Bill's like, or not Bill, Mike's like, okay, we need to get a token like this shower cap from all of you. Oh. So they all split up and go to find these tokens.
I kind of like that. It's like a quest. Yes,
exactly. I kind of liked it too. So they all have to like retrace their steps after, because they're saying, but we were always together, like we don't have anything that's just ours. And then they were like, oh no, because we had that fight where Bill punched Richie in the face and everybody like stopped talking. So they had to find something from the time they were apart.
Oh.
Which I found was interesting.
Yeah. Because Stan's token obviously was from they were together.
Yeah. But everybody else had to retrace their steps from when they were apart. So, which I think he justified it by saying, that's the only part I can't remember for you. Like, you guys have to go remember for yourselves because we weren't together.
That makes sense.
So you have to go remember for yourselves. So they all go off on their little side quests. And so Bev goes to her old apartment and knocks on the door, and this old lady lives there now. And she's like, come in. And I'm pretty sure in the original movie it was the same thing. There was an old lady living there, right? So the old lady's like, let me make you some tea. Go look around, make yourself at home. So Bev goes, looks around. She pulls apart, what's the word I'm looking for? The bottom of the wall.
Baseboard?
Baseboard. She pulls off the baseboard, and she has like a stash of stuff in a Ziploc bag, which how convenient of her to leave things in the wall in a Ziploc bag so they're perfectly preserved.
Good thinking, Bev.
Good thinking, teenage Bev. So she has her postcard that talks about, your hair is winter fire, January embers. My heart burns there too.
Which you almost can't say the last line. I feel like you have to whisper it.
My heart burns there too.
Yeah.
It's just terrible. No, it's great, but real cheesy, and it gets worse. So so she finds her postcard, and I feel like a couple other things in there, but the postcard I think was the important part for her. That was her token. Let me see if nope, just her. Yeah. Love letter, but she still thinks that Bill wrote it, not Ben.
Oh, that's weird. Well, I guess she probably doesn't remember the bit in the sewer where he quoted it back to her. So.
Yeah. So she still thinks that Bill is her secret admirer from when they were kids. Mm-hmm. And she sees it and clearly gets this whole like, oh yeah, he loved me look on her face. Like real googly eyed. So then she goes out to have tea with the old lady who then like disappears for a minute. And behind Bev's shoulder, you just see this naked old lady kind of dancing weird.
What?
And like, I think maybe she was walking, but she was making very weird movements that we all laughed at because it just looked ridiculous. And then this big, like she kind of became this huge, big, animated, naked old lady with floppy boobs chasing Bev around. Like it was the most ridiculous.
Yeah, that doesn't sound scary. That sounds like absurd.
Yeah, it was ridiculous and not scary at all. And Bev's like trying to get out, and then she looks down the hallway and sees this guy. Oh, and the old lady says something about how her dad used to work at a circus, and then she's looking at pictures and sees a picture of Pennywise, but like looks like a normal dude. And so she's like, oh crap, I gotta get out of here. And that's when she starts leaving. Then the naked lady chases her, and it's real weird. And then, really, the saggy old lady were sticking. Anyway, it was just ridiculous.
Did you get that old song stuck in your head about him hanging low? And
no, I didn't even
time in a knot, time in a bow.
But yeah, like that.
Okay.
But kind of pointing in weird direction. Anyway, so it was just uncomfortable. And then
as uncomfortable as cabin fever?
No, nothing is as uncomfortable as cabin fever.
Okay, just checking.
Especially seeing it with someone you hadn't been dating for very long. So then look down the hallway, and it's that guy from the picture. So clearly Pennywise, but his face looks normal. And then he starts
it's just like Bill Skarsgård with no clown makeup on?
Yeah, but it didn't really look like Bill Skarsgård. I mean, I'm assuming it was, but he like still had this weird like smile face, like kind of like in the Michael Keaton Batman when the Joker paints his face with like normal makeup. Mm-hmm. His face still looked weird.
Yeah.
But it was skin color, his normal skin color, you know?
Interesting.
And then, just like in Batman, he, like, starts wiping the makeup off to reveal his white face underneath. It really sort of reminded me of Jack Nicholson. I kind of had a hard time with this scene because of that. But he, like, pulls his face and it, like, reveals his Pennywise face.
Interesting.
And, like, basically tells Bev, you'll die if you try. Don't even come after me or whatever. I'll kill you all. And she freaks out and runs out of the building and looks back, and the apartment building is like abandoned, old, dilapidated, windows boarded up that it did not look like before.
I love that. That's one of my favorite. John, that bathroom's been closed for 40 years.
Exactly.
And my DM pulled that on me like last weekend, and I wanted to quote that so bad.
Exactly. So, yeah, she freaks out, obviously. But she's got her token. So, and I think while she's in the apartment, she remembers a really creepy moment with her dad where he talks about how her mom died because she didn't want to be her mom, and so it was her fault.
What?
And then he talks about how he can still smell her perfume and then sprays perfume on Bev and just like holds her and smells her, and it's really weird.
Oh.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yep. Real uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So, yeah, she has that whole, I remember what happened to me and I don't like it. You know, which, poor thing. So then Ben goes to high school And he is sitting in high school. Like, it's like he's in summer school. And it flashes back to young Ben sitting in summer school. And he looks up and it's like, you know, those old projectors that we all took notes on? It was like the light up overhead projector thing that the teachers would like write notes on, and it would project it onto the...
Oh, yeah. They had the transparencies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was like one of those was lit up, and he looks up and sees the outline of Pennywise and then turns around and it's Bev. And Bev sits down and is like talking to him and like smoking or whatever. And he's like, "You're smoking in school?" And she points up and the fire alarm's been disarmed. And she's like, "It's my secret hideout." And they're like talking for whatever. And he decides to be brave and tell her, like, I think he recites the poem, the January Embers poem, and then tries to kiss her. And she like laughs in his face and pushes him off and is like, "You didn't think I actually would let you kiss me, did you? Like, what's wrong with you?" And then turns into Pennywise.
Oh.
And starts chasing him. And does my favorite line from the old one. And he's like, "Kiss me, fat boy." And starts chasing him. And he runs and then climbs in his locker. And the whole time you're like, how big is this kid's locker? Because Ben was a chubby kid. And lockers are tiny, and he, like, has room to move around in his locker. Like, it's the weirdest thing. And he has, like, a poster of New Kids on the Block in his locker, which is fabulous. And he's, like, watching out the little slats in the locker. And then he turns around, and Pennywise is there.
Inside the locker with him?
Like, inside the locker with him. But then, like, while he's in the locker... this piece of paper gets fed through the locker door, and it's the page from his yearbook. The only person assigned his yearbook was Bev.
Oh, right.
And it says something like, "Stay cool, have a good summer, love Bev," and has like hearts drawn around it or something.
Hags.
Yeah. And he like takes this folded up piece of paper, and then adult Ben is standing in the hallway and opens his wallet, and he's had that piece of paper in his wallet the whole time.
Aww.
I know.
So cute.
He's been pining his whole life.
For 27 years.
Yeah.
Dang.
I thought Luke had it good with his 12-year horoscope thing in his wallet from Lorelai. No. Ben Hanscom, 27 years.
That was a Gilmore Girls reference for those of you
who didn't catch it.
the uninitiated.
So, yeah. Freaking adorable. And also incredibly sad.
Yeah.
So he's like, "This is my token," and takes the paper and leaves the school. And I'm trying to think of anything else. I think that was everything. And then so Eddie goes to the pharmacy to refill his inhaler.
Adult Eddie?
Yeah.
Okay.
And remembers a time when he was a kid and went to pick up his inhaler. And he, like, before he can leave the pharmacy, hears his mom calling his name from the basement.
Of the pharmacy?
Yeah.
Oh, that's not good.
And...
doesn't sound like a mom thing to do.
Yeah. And so he goes in the basement, and his mom is, like, strapped to a table. Like one of those old operating tables, but it's, like, propped up, you know, that they use in scary movies. Mm-hmm. I always think of Spaceballs when they're like, "We're going to give you back your old nose." No! And she's, like, strapped to the table like that. So, his mom's strapped to the table, and she's like, "Help me, you have to get me out of here." And he goes to get her out, and there's, like, a guy in the corner covered in a sheet who, like, slowly comes at him, and he's, like, chained to the pipes in the ceiling, and, like, slowly comes at him, and he's, like, trying to get his mom out, and then the sheets come off, and it's, like, this creepy leper guy who, like, is coming at him and has this, like, really long, gross tongue, and I think he runs off and leaves his mom there when he's a little kid. So he goes down as an adult and he's like, why is that curtain still there? Like, why is the table? Like, how is this still happening? You know? Yeah. And he goes over and the leper guy comes out and he like starts strangling him and fighting back. And he like almost kills him.
Wait, Eddie's strangling the leper guy?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then I think the guy disappears, or maybe the pharmacist comes down the stairs and is like, what are you doing here? And then the guy disappears and it's like just a normal basement without all the creepy surgical equipment.
Oh, weird.
And Eddie's like, what the? And just like runs away. It was really weird.
That's so interesting because that makes me think that his phobia is like two-part, you know, because he's afraid of illness and also afraid of medical procedures and stuff.
And like disappointing his mom and being a chicken, like all of it wrapped into one.
There's so much to unpack there.
So his token is his inhaler, which is similar in the first movie. You know, they're like, this is battery acid slime, and they all take a hit off the inhaler before they fight Pennywise. So his inhaler's always kind of played a role.
Yeah.
So that was kind of interesting. And then it cuts to Richie. I don't remember which order they all get their stuff in. But so Richie's is very much not anything that has ever happened in the original. And I don't know about the book, so you'll have to tell me if this is the case. So Richie is in an arcade in the movie theater. So adult Richie wanders in to like the old boarded up movie theater. And he's playing an arcade game with this guy, and he wins, and he's having like clearly having fun making friends with this guy. And the guy starts to walk away, and he's like, hey, you don't have to go. Like, we could hang out more if you want. And just then Henry Bowers comes up, and he's like, what are you doing with my cousin? And like calls him a homophobic slur. And he's like, stay away from him, you homophobic slur. I don't want to say it.
Yeah.
So then, like, Richie gets all upset and runs outside and has young Richie and has a run-in with the big Paul Bunyan statue, which I know happened in the book.
Yeah.
So the Paul Bunyan statue, so he's, like, sitting there and Pennywise is on the shoulder of the statue and he's holding this, like, array of red balloons, and he's like, I know your secret and I'm gonna tell. And Richie starts freaking out and he's like, no, you can't tell anyone. Like, so clearly it's implying that Richie is gay,
Right.
Which I don't think was ever a thing before, but it added an interesting twist for me.
Yeah.
But it was an interesting addition because it wasn't a thing as far as I'm aware.
Yeah. And in the book, it's kind of like hinted at, but isn't overt that Richie and Eddie maybe had like a special relationship. But it wasn't. And the book, I mean, was published, what, in like the early 80s? So, yeah.
So maybe that's why they make a little hint at it, but don't make a huge deal about it. So maybe it wasn't the book.
Yeah.
So anyway, Pennywise is like, I know your secret. I'm going to get you. And he's on top of this like Paul Bunyan statue, floats away and like kind of distracts Richie for a second. And Richie turns around and the Paul Bunyan statue is like attacking him and coming at him. And he is like freaking out and like running and hiding, whatever. This Paul Bunyan statue is like taking swings at him and like stomping around. And all of a sudden he snaps out of it and nothing is happening. He looks around and everybody's kind of staring at him like, what is wrong with you? And he just gets up and runs away.
Yeah.
Like, so his thing is the little token from the arcade.
Okay.
Yeah.
A literal token.
Yeah, which was cool. So then cuts to Bill, who is walking by a thrift store and sees his old bike, Silver.
Aw.
Yeah. So he goes in and talks to the shop owner, played by Stephen King.
Oh, right on.
So I thought it was really fun. And I read in the trivia that he hadn't made an appearance in one of his feature films since Thinner.
What?
Yeah. So he's been in like all the miniseries and stuff, but he hasn't been in like the feature films.
And in Thinner, I think he plays a pharmacist.
I don't know that I've ever seen Thinner, actually.
Oh, Thinner holds up.
Yeah. Okay, we'll have to watch that one because I actually have not seen that one. It might be the only Stephen King I haven't seen. But No, I don't think I've ever actually seen Firestarter either. Isn't that Stephen King as well?
Yes.
And I've always wanted to. So we might have to watch some Stephen Kings that I haven't seen before.
Kelly and I have been on kind of a kick of trying to get a hold of a lot of his old miniseries. Because when we were growing up, that was the huge thing.
Like, oh, yeah. The Stephen King miniseries were huge.
Yeah, and I've been wanting to rewatch The Perfect Storm. Oh, no, not Perfect Storm. Storm of the Century. Yeah, I've been wanting to rewatch that. Because I haven't seen it since it originally aired, and I'm pretty sure we were in like the ninth grade.
Rose Red.
Yeah.
So I would love to see those two again.
Excellent. Yeah. It's a plan.
And like I told you, I own The Stand, so we can watch that.
Excellent. But do you own it on Laserdisc?
No, I do not.
Okay.
Because my life is sad. But anyway, I thought it was cool. Stephen King made an appearance. So he goes to buy the bike, and Stephen King has one of Bill's books sitting on the counter, and Stephen King basically tells him, your endings are garbage, but I like your book. Which is so funny because Stephen King gets crap for his endings too.
Yeah, that's like a big criticism, especially about it too. Like a lot of people talk about how, it is great, and it is really well, like super well written, but a lot of people are like, oh yeah, it's a great book, but the ending's terrible, and that's what you hear all the time.
I feel the same way about The Stand. I love The Stand, but I cannot watch the fourth part and be totally fine, because it's just it's too much.
That's pretty dang funny. I like that.
Yeah. So yeah, it was really great that Stephen King was giving Bill a hard time about his endings. It was so self-aware and fantastic. I loved it. So he buys his bike back, and he like takes his bike out on the street, and some kid's like, is that thing even gonna work, mister? And he's like, it outrun the devil. And he like gets on it, and it won't pedal, and like the handlebars keep coming apart. And it was like the best. But then he starts riding, and it goes, and he's like riding his bike, and you can just tell it like lit up like a Christmas tree, and he's totally home and happy, and everything's great because he's got his bike back, right? And he decides to ride his bike past his old house, and the boy that Richie yelled at in the Chinese theater lives in his old house. So he comes out, and he's on his skateboard, and he's just like, bye, Mom, see you later, whatever. And Bill's just like, oh my gosh, that's so weird. Because like he lived there, and then there's this little boy living there.
Yeah.
And he drives his bike around the corner to where Georgie died.
Oh.
And he gets down on his hands and knees and like is yelling into the grate, like
a perfectly
totally
rational
normal adult would do, and starts yelling into the grate like,
old man yells at cloud.
I hope you can hear me. I'm gonna kill you. Like he's just real mad and yelling. And why Georgie? Why did it have to be Georgie? He meets Georgie in the storm drain, who gives him his boat, his little paper boat, and says like, I only got killed because you wouldn't come outside.
Oh, harsh.
So it's your fault. Like, your fault that I died. So he takes the boat, and he's, like, crying about it. And then Pennywise might come and, like, drag Georgie away. Something happens anyway. So Bill gets scared and, like, runs away from the drain and runs into the little boy on the skateboard. And, like, grabs the little boy, and he's like, don't you ever, ever go near that storm drain. If you ever hear voices coming out of the drain, like, don't go near it. Run. And the little boy's like, calm down. I don't, like, do you hear voices from the storm drain? Like, trying to make him think he's crazy. And then he's like, I don't hear voices from the storm drain. And he starts skateboarding away, and then he turns around and he goes, but sometimes I do hear him in the bathtub.
Oh, I just got the goosebumps.
Yeah. And Bill's like, don't listen to the voices. Like, stay safe. And he's like, go home, tell your parents to leave Derry, like, right now. He's like, I don't care what you have to tell them you have to move right now. You guys have to leave Derry, never come back, never think about it again. Like, just leave. And the little boy's like, I'm supposed to go to the fair, crazy guy, and, like, skateboards away. And Bill's just like, no, leave Derry, but the boy's gone. So they all reconvene back at the inn, and they all are like, we got our thing, whatever, but don't tell each other what it is.
Oh.
And then,
like, on purpose, or they just don't think to?
I just don't think they get a chance. So then I think they're all sort of separated, and Bill is alone with Bev. And this is when they kind of have a moment, and Bev says something like, my heart burns there too. And then they share a kiss. And Bill looks real confused. And then while they're standing there with each other, a skateboard comes down the stairs of the inn.
No.
Yes, just by itself. And it flips over when it gets to the bottom. And it says something like, I can't remember, you'll float too or something, whatever. Bill knows exactly what's happening and that Pennywise is going to kill the kid from before. So he freaks out and goes to the carnival. And he's
to rescue the kid.
He's like, I have to save this kid, and just takes off. And so this is when the creepy flashy scene happens that you were worried about. Right. So he goes and he follows the boy into like a fun house. And there's all these like hanging clowns that are swinging that he has to get past and things like that. And they end up in a room with all kinds of like glass walls. And he ends up on opposite side of the glass wall from the little boy. And he like is tapping on the glass and he's like, you have to get out of here. We have to make sure you're okay. Like, we have to get you out of here. And the little boy turns around and Pennywise is behind him. So it's like Bill, glass wall, little boy, glass wall, Pennywise. So Bill is like hitting against the glass wall, trying to break it, trying to get to this little boy. And Pennywise starts just like banging his head against the glass and it's like cracking. Oh. And so the little boy's like freaking out and he's like, help me, help me. And Bill's like trying to get through the glass and he can't. And all of a sudden Pennywise gets through, the glass box fills with blood, and that's the end.
Oh.
Yeah.
So that was a super stroby scene.
Yes.
Did you feel like the light flashing added anything to it at all, or?
It actually did add to the creep factor, I think. Yeah. Because it was like, you know, flash, then Pennywise is there. Flash, and he's hitting his head. Like, flash, you know.
Yeah.
So it did sort of add to the movie a little. I don't usually like the flashy, but it worked in that scene. But it was over pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Like,
see? Scream Girl Squad, tough but fair on flashy scenes.
Yeah, yeah. It was over pretty quickly. But definitely unnerving. So Bill comes out of the fair and...
how hopeless. Like, I would just feel so disheartened, you know, like he told me he was going to kill him. I went there and I still couldn't stop it.
Yes. So Bill is like way upset. So in the meantime, everyone else is back at the inn. Eddie goes up to go to the bathroom and Henry Bowers is waiting for him and they get in a scuffle and he stabs Eddie in the face with his knife. So he like has this knife sticking out of his face, which is just awful. And then Henry like is hiding behind the shower curtain maybe. I'm trying to remember. Anyway, Eddie ends up stabbing Henry back. Like he fights back and he stabs him, like pulls the knife out of his face and stabs Henry.
Ooh.
And it was way brutal. But cool that Eddie like fought back.
Yeah.
And then he, like, Mike and Richie are in the parking lot. I think Richie wanted to take off again. And Mike is, like, trying to convince him to stay. Like, he's like, you can't leave. We have to do this together. Like, you have to stay. You have to stay.
Right.
And then Ben and Bev, I think, are with Eddie and trying to stop the bleeding. And Richie and Mike are down in the parking lot. And Henry, like, surprises them and pulls the knife out of his stomach and stabs Mike. And then Richie ends up killing him.
Oh, so, ooh.
Yeah.
Like, Eddie strikes the first blow and Richie has to finish him off.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah. So, and Richie makes some crack about, you know, like they all go back inside and Eddie's like, I just got stabbed in the face. And Richie's like, well, I just killed somebody. So, like, whoop-de-doo, basically.
Yeah.
And Richie just has this dry sarcasm the whole time. Like, he is just cracking jokes the whole time, but in a way of like a total defense mechanism, you know? And it's not like he's really trying to make anybody laugh. He just says really funny things. So then they decide that they have to go back into the sewers because that's where they saw Pennywise. And Bill's like, I'm going to kill him by myself. I don't want you guys to get killed. And they're like, no, we have to do it together. So they all meet up at that dilapidated house from the first one.
The well house.
The well house, yeah. So they all meet up at the house, and they go down into the sewer through the well, whatever. And they get down into the sewer, and Mike's like, we have to perform the ritual. So you all have to put, like, your token in. He has this, like, leather cone thing that the Native Americans gave him, and it has, like, pictures on all sides about, like, Pennywise coming down, like, it coming down from the sky, and then them doing this ritual, and, like, interesting little cone thing. So he has this cone thing, and they start a fire in it, and they're like, we have to put the tokens in one at a time. So first they put in Stan's shower cap, and the whole time Richie's like, that's not going to burn, but whatever. And Mike's like, mine is this bloody rock that you guys threw at Henry Bowers when we all became friends.
Aww.
And, like, drops that in. And, like, Richie the whole time's like, yeah, that's not going to burn either, but okay. And, like, just gives everybody a hard time. So Bev pulls out her poem and, like, looks at Bill when she says it. And Ben is like, oh my gosh, that's my poem, you know? And so she puts the poem in, and then he pulls out his piece of yearbook paper with her signature on it. And she's like, oh my gosh. And then he burns that. And then, you know, they put in the inhaler, and Bill's like, here's Georgie's boat. And nobody even...
I had been thinking just now, I was like, how are they going to fit that bicycle in there?
I did the same thing. Like, when he gets his bike, I'm like, how is that going to be his token? And then he gets the boat. So the boat is his token. So he puts the boat in, and they do this whole thing, and Pennywise comes out of the jar thing. Like, the balloon, you know, explodes the lid off the jar, and Pennywise comes out like a spider, which I hate, but he has, like, a Pennywise head, like
on
the clown head on a spider body, which looks ridiculous. And he's, like, talking the whole time. And he gets Mike to tell everyone that the last time the ritual was done, it didn't work, and everybody died. And Mike had scratched off that picture from the one side of the thing. So he knew the whole time it wasn't going to work. All their side quests were completely pointless, and absolutely nothing that they did was going to make any sort of a difference.
Great.
So Pennywise is basically like, ha ha, I'm going to eat you all.
Jill just did finger guns.
I did.
And I'm sure that the spider in the film also did 8 finger guns.
Oh, absolutely. Because why would you not? And difference I wanted to talk about is in the 1991, Mike, and even in the book, Mike gets injured by Henry Bowers and is in the hospital and doesn't even go into the sewers with them. So he's there the whole time, which is different from both other versions.
Yeah.
So Mike is still saying, we have to face our fears. We have to do it together. And Pennywise, like, they call it it. And that just gets really confusing. I'm going to call it Pennywise so I don't get confused.
Yeah.
Because saying it just gets confusing. So Pennywise, like, kind of separates them all. And Bill goes off one way. Ben and Bev go off another way. And Eddie and Richie go off another way. So Bill goes off and ends up in the basement of his old house. And my creepy favorite scene from the first chapter, when Pennywise is, like, hiding in the water and using Georgie as a puppet. So it, like, recreates that. So childhood Ben comes down the stairs and starts having... Bill comes down the stairs, and then he's having a conversation with adult Bill, and he's like, it's your fault. Like, you weren't even sick that day. You just didn't want to play with your brother, and you sent him out by himself, and then he died. And adult Bill is, like, crying, and he's like, I'm so sorry. I'm a terrible brother. Like, I don't know why I did that, you know? And young Bill is trying to give him a hard time. And then it's like adult Bill is Pennywise, and he's the one using Georgie as a puppet. And, like, it was really creepy and weird, and he had to, like, face his fears. So then Kid Bill pulls out the sheep killing gun from the first one and puts it to adult Bill's head. And he's like, you're a terrible brother, and this was all your fault. And if only you would love Georgie more, like, he'd still be alive. And he grabs the gun and turns it around on Kid Bill, and he's like, no. He's like, not wanting to play with your brother one time does not make me a bad brother. Like, I did everything that I could, and I loved Georgie. And it was this whole big thing. And he pulls the gun on Kid Georgie, and he disappears. And it's like he defeated that part of Pennywise because he faced his fears, and he was like, no, it's not my fault, and he like overcame that. And so then in the meantime, Ben and Bev get thrust into their own set of nightmare world. So Bev ends up in the bathroom stall from the first movie where she gets the wet garbage dumped on her.
Right.
All of these people from her past, so like her bullies from high school, the weird, creepy pharmacist is something like Smile Lois Lane, and like Henry Bowers tries to pop his head in the stall door, and he's like, here's Johnny, which is a nice throwback to The Shining.
Yeah.
And then it just starts filling with blood, the stall. And so she's like drowning in blood. She hears Ben say, like, Bev, I love you. And then he's like, your hair is winter fire, January embers, my heart burns there too, or whatever, like yells it to her in such a dramatic way that like, she's like, oh my gosh, it was Ben this whole time. And then she like breaks out of the bathroom stall, and he like helps pull her out and like saves her. And then she's like, oh my gosh, it's you. It was you the whole time. And he's just like, yeah, it was. And they hug, and you're just like, or at least I do, because anything too sappy makes me do that. But it was real. It just didn't fit with the tone at all. Like, all of a sudden they're having a Notebook moment, and it's not okay. Like,
I feel like this scene might have been responsible for that half, like, enjoyment unit decrease from the first one.
It's quite possible. It was too much for my cold dead heart. So, so anyway, Ben and Bev are reunited, and Bill breaks out of his thing, and so they're like converging back on Pennywise. And meanwhile, Eddie and
Richie, every
time I forget Richie's name. He's like my favorite. Richie and Eddie are off in the other corridor, and they have that repeat from the first movie where it's like the 3 doors, and it's like very scary, scary, not scary. And Richie's like, I know this game. Like, it's backwards. Don't open the not scary door, open the very scary door, or whatever. And so they open it, and it's like it's like the top half of a dead girl just like hanging in the closet. And Richie's like, no, and like shuts the door. And then he's like, I don't know what to do. He's like, maybe, all right, we'll just try not scary. And they open not scary, and the girl's legs come running at them, and they're like, and like shut the door. And Richie's just like, I hate this guy. And then they hear everybody else behind them and go back into where Pennywise was. So they all end up back in this big cavern with Pennywise again. We need to talk about the cavern. So basically, the cavern is where Pennywise crash landed when he first came to Earth, like millions of years ago. It is his fortress of solitude. There was nothing else I could think of the whole time except for like, he's Superman, and this is his fortress of solitude, and this is where his spaceship, like, crash landed. And it looked like it had stalagmites all over the place. Like, no, it wasn't made out of ice in the middle of nowhere, like the fortress of solitude. But, like, it was his super secret hideout where his spaceship crash landed when he came to Earth. Like, and he has superhuman powers. And no, I'm not saying Pennywise and Superman are similar, but the whole scene was a bit much for me with the whole alien aspect. Like, and I will never think of that pit as anything but his fortress of solitude, because that's all it was. It was just like his super secret hideout nobody else knew about or could get to.
That's awesome.
So that's where they were, in this Pennywise's fortress of solitude. So they're down in there, and they all are just like, we have to fight back. So they all start trying to fight Pennywise, like hitting him with stuff, throwing rocks at him, whatever. And he stabs Eddie with one of his big, like, claw hands.
Oh.
And Eddie is just clearly bleeding to death. And Richie is heartbroken and just sitting next to him. And Eddie didn't want to go in the basement. He's like, what if I'm not brave enough and I can't do it? And Eddie's telling him the whole time, like, you were so brave. Like, you pulled the knife out of your face and stabbed Henry Bowers with it. Like, you fought back the whole time. Like, you are tougher than you think you are. But he had, like, frozen at some other moment when they needed him. And so he was like, what if I freeze again and I can't help you and I can't, you know? And they were just like, you were awesome. You were such a big help. You're amazing, you know? And he, like, is totally just gushing blood. And they're like, we have to kill this guy. Like, and Richie has this, like, renewed sense of valor. Like, he's just pissed. And they all start fighting Pennywise. And then they remember that when they fight back is when he gets weaker.
Oh, yeah.
So they basically just mean girl him and make fun of him, which then makes him small. Oh, because why they all separated and got in the caverns was because they were like, oh, when we all came in here, like, Pennywise had to shrink down to fit through this tiny entrance we all, like, shimmied through to get here. So if we can get him back there, he has to get small and then we can kill him. But then he tricked them all. So they're like, we have to make him small again. So they decide to psychologically make him small. And this was so ridiculous for me. This also took away part of the enjoyment factor. But it's that whole Stephen King endings thing. So they basically just bully him. And they're just like, you're not even scary. You're just a clown. And, like, just start yelling that at him. You're just a clown. You're just a clown. And Pennywise shrinks to become this tiny little clown.
Aww.
Like a little baby clown that looks terrifying. Like, I never saw this movie, but I imagine it's what Benjamin Button looked like when he was old but a baby. So he was, like, tiny and wrinkly and, like, melting into his fortress of solitude. Like, he was, like, leaning up against this, like, rock thing and, like, melting into it as they all were just like, you're a stupid little clown. Like, it was so ridiculous and weird.
I wish you could all see the layer of, like, derision on Jill's face. She is...
it was just awful.
She's not having any of it.
But better than the original where he was just a big scary spider and then they fired a silver earring into his chest hole. So, you know, I did like this one a little better than that.
Yeah.
So then Bill rips his still beating heart out of little wrinkled baby Pennywise's chest, sort of Indiana Jones style, and just rips this heart out of his chest, and they all grab a piece of it and hold hands and squish it. So then he dies.
Nice.
So, you know, united front, squash the heart.
Yeah. Everything's better with a friend.
Yeah.
Even squashing
clown
hearts.
Wrinkly baby clown hearts. So he, like, petrifies into the stone and dies. Which I also thought was totally dumb. Whatever. But they win! Yay! So they all get out of the cavern. And in the original, like, Bill's wife had been, like, petrified and he had to, like, save her. None of this was there. Yeah. Like, his wife was not a thing that existed, and he made out with Bev a little bit. So it was a little weird that they didn't even touch on his wife.
Yeah, his wife
at
was
all.
Audra, and she was, way more in the first one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She was played by Juliet from the original Romeo and Juliet, but she did not even participate in this movie at all.
Yeah, because that was, like, the sad part of the ending in the 1990 version. He, like, puts her on the handlebars of silver and, like, rides her down the road to try to, like, get
wakes
her
her
to...
up.
Yeah.
Good old John Boy. Yeah. Like, that's... Nope, none of that. No emotional Audra bit at all. So... the movie ends, and then they like have to wrap everything up, which then takes another little while. So, like Ben and Bev go off to live happily ever after, and Richie carves him and Eddie's initials into like this wooden bridge, which was pretty sweet. Yeah. And then Bill is writing, and Mike calls him on the phone, and he's like, I'm packing up. I think I'm going to go see the world. Like, I don't have a reason to stay in Derry anymore. I'm going to go. And they all talk about how they still remember, so they aren't forgetting again, which in the original, they started to forget again. But in this one, it's like, nope, we remember because we're cool.
Because Pennywise is dead, so his power doesn't make
them forget. They don't need to forget, I guess. But so Mike talks about how he's going to go see the world. Ben and Bev go off and live happily ever after because his heart burns there too. And then Bill is writing, and he talks about how, I know the ending already. Like, this ending's going to be great. And you're like, sure it is, Bill. No. And then Mike says, did you get the letter? And Bill's like, what letter? And he's like, we all got one. You'll know it when you see it. And he gets a letter written by Stan. Beautiful letter where basically he apologizes for not being able to come. And he says, I knew I wouldn't be able to face Pennywise, but I knew that if I didn't come, you guys wouldn't be able to do it. This was my way of giving you the edge, even though I couldn't go. So this is the only way you guys could do it without me, basically. So it was like he's self-sacrificed
to give them
an edge.
Yeah.
And asks them all to live their life to the fullest on his behalf. Basically. Yeah. So that's how it ends. Is this super emotional letter that wasn't in the first one, but I actually kind of was okay with the letter.
Yeah.
That was okay with me. But my question has always been, because Pennywise, like, especially heavily in the first half of the movie, like, made people in the town crappy, right? Like, it made the adults not pay attention to bad things, and like, they talk about how there was a huge rate of murders, and not just every 27 years. Like, people in Derry were dropping like flies all the time.
Yeah.
So it wasn't always just about Pennywise, because he only came out every 27 years.
Yeah.
So there's all of this, like, people in Derry just suck as human beings. And they don't address it, like, with Pennywise dead, does that change? Or is Derry still the stink hole of the United States and nobody, like, should live there ever, right? Like, they don't talk about... I would like to know how the world changed without Pennywise, besides just, like, the 5 of them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Because they spend a lot of time focusing on how he ruined Derry. So I wanted to know, like, it got better.
Yeah.
And there wasn't this, like, black cloud over everything, and that wasn't addressed at all. And so that sort of bothers me. And it didn't bother me when I was a kid and watched the original one, but it bothered me now. So there was that. I
feel like...
But so there was just a lot of things about it that I was like, okay.
Yeah.
And like Bill and Bev just kind of kiss and then they never talk about it again. Or the fact that he's married. And I know in the book, I think it says they have an affair. Bill and Bev. But like in the first one, he's just like super devoted to his wife and like doesn't care about Bev anymore. And that was better for me. Like... Yeah. Instead of, I love this girl I kissed one time when I was 13. Like, enough to ruin the marriage of the person I've been with for the last, I don't know, however many years. You know what I mean? Like, that's always weird to me.
I'm pretty sensitive to that stuff. That's why I didn't like did you read Pride and Prejudice and Zombies?
I never read it. I just saw the movie.
Yeah. Well, I was predisposed to not super love it anyway, because that's one of the classics that I actually really, truly, genuinely adore. Yeah. And I love reading that one. Yeah. Not the zombie one, but the actual Jane Austen book. Mm-hmm. And in Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, for some reason, they decided that, and by they I mean the author, that Mr. Bennett would cheat on his wife while he like takes his daughters away to Japan so that they can learn to be warriors, and he has an affair with a woman in Japan. And I was so upset about it because Mr. Bennett is like this sweet man who just loves his family and like adores
and like his wife is crazy, but he loves her anyway.
Yeah,
he's like, she's my crazy.
Yeah. And I was just like, what the crap? You don't. So
yeah, I agree. And I have a hard time with that. In general, like, I feel like that happens all the time where, like, chick flicks do this a lot, that it doesn't make a ton of sense to me. Like, The Wedding Planner is one of my favorite movies, but he decides he doesn't want to get married to the woman he's been with for the past, like, 11 years because he meets this woman and hangs out with her for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
You know, like, that's always really hard for me. How do you make that decision based on, you know what I mean? Like,
how deep
you clearly
is your emotional
weren't
attachment
committed
really?
in the first place.
Exactly.
And once a cheater, always a cheater. Like, why are you not going to fall in love with the next pretty face that comes along?
Yes.
Like, at what point are you going to make an actual commitment to the person that you're with and not be swayed by? Anyway, so I have a hard time with that whole bit. So they didn't like focus on it a ton, but it was weird that they touched on it, but then didn't focus on it. And then she was just like, just kidding, I like Ben now.
Yeah.
And you're just like, okay.
So you feel like it would have been better if they just left it out.
Yeah. Like, hadn't done the whole retouch on her and Bill's relationship thing. Because it just, I don't know. And then it makes her feel all flighty. Like, she's got a husband in the beginning, and then she kisses Bill, and then she ends up with Ben, and, like, what happened to the husband? And, like, they just, you know what I mean? There's just a lot of weirdness in that way. So, yeah. I enjoyed the movie. But, again, I just enjoy the first part of the story more.
Yeah. Well, and the first part doesn't really have an ending. So
that maybe is why I like it. I get to come up with my own ending.
Well, and like we've talked about that criticism of Stephen King too.
That exactly.
The midpoint, the cliffhanger type thing in the middle might be better than the actual ending.
Yes.
So one other thing I wanted to touch on, when we were talking about the first chapter of It, you were bringing up the point that there's not very many movies that made people super afraid of something the way that It did, afraid of clowns. And my friend Cody, shout out to Cody. Hi.
Hi, Cody. I don't know you, but thanks.
He brought up Jaws as an example of another film that made people very, like, irrationally afraid of something. Because people stopped going to beaches. And
this is a very good point, because not that people weren't already afraid of sharks, like that's a thing.
Yeah.
But like, I think the beachfront communities were worried because beach attendance dropped significantly when that movie came out. Like, people did not want to go to the beach, and that is absolutely a great example of a movie creating that kind of fear. So thank you, Cody, for bringing that up.
So, and I feel like that the first movie played more on the fear of clowns, but the second half is less about a fear of clowns and more just about, like, getting over childhood trauma, I guess.
Yeah, kind of.
So,
yeah, I can agree with that.
Yeah.
Which is, you know, get over your childhood trauma by going to the Fortress of Solitude and kicking a clown in the face.
If only it were that easy, honestly. Like, I wish
bully a clown in the Fortress of Solitude, all childhood trauma over.
If that were a business or something, like if you could somehow like profit off this.
Oh, goodness.
Well, thank you for taking me through It Chapter 2. So Jill and I have big plans for you for the rest of October. So we're pretty excited to be taking you through the way that another story, kind of like It, has seen different evolutions. So stay tuned for that. That's all the hints you're getting for now. But this has been Scream Girl Squad. Bye.